Hey buddy, Steve here with Steve TV, and today I wanted to share with you guys my 2020 trip to Six Flags over Texas. Now, before I get started, I just wanted to wish everybody a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. Right now, I know I'm sounding a little sick, but I'm trying to get over this COVID stuff, and I'm telling you right now, it has been a nightmare. I feel as if my body's been poisoned or something. But yeah, without further ado, let's jump right in. As most of you know, California's been closed for the majority of 2020, and that means theme parks too. A lot of us theme park junkies are going stir crazy, so I decided to book a trip to get out of California to check out another Six Flags park. Six Flags over Texas was an obvious choice, being the closest Six Flags park to California. Plus, it was the first Six Flags ever built, and that in itself is worthy of a visit. I talked my niece and my nephews into going with me, so we grabbed our plane tickets and headed to LAX on Friday, November 20th, 2020. This was my first time flying with Spirit Airlines, so I didn't know what to expect, but I gotta say they weren't half bad. Boarding was relatively painless, and the flight was a short 3 hours from LAX to Dallas Airport. From the airport, we hopped on an Uber and took a short drive to the Ranger Inn and Suites, just across from Six Flags over Texas. Our hotel room was as standard as they come, and the staff was very kind and very professional. We arrived at our hotel room at around 7 p.m., and when we got there, we realized that we had time to go explore the park. I already had Saturday and Sunday booked, but we thought, why not? Might as well get a head start. The first thing I noticed upon entering the park was that the layout was completely different from Magic Mountain, which is my home park. Of course, I expected this to be the case, but we were totally lost for the first night we were there and could barely find our way back out. The very first ride we hopped on that night was Mr. Freeze Reverse Blast, which is a Premier Rides launched shuttle coaster. This ride pulls some pretty powerful G's, and since it's launched backwards, it has that element of surprise. You don't know what's going to hit you. I was really impressed with the queue for this ride. It's modeled after a sort of ice cream factory. Usually a lot of Six Flags rides suffer from a lack of theming, but they knocked it out of the park with this one. Right next door to Mr. Freeze Reverse Blast was a floorless B&M Batman clone. I never thought I'd be this happy to see Batman the ride, but with Six Flags Magic Mountain being closed for so long, this was a welcome sight. It made me feel a little bit at home. This ride was intense, as all Batman clones are, but I think Magic Mountain's Batman the ride has the edge on intensity at least. The queue was cool. It had that Gotham City, Gotham Park kind of vibe, and the underground tunnels of Gotham going for it. After Batman the Ride, we meandered around the park for a bit until we came across New Texas Giant, the granddaddy of all RMC hybrids. Right off the bat, this ride looked a little intimidating, and I had to coax my nephew into getting on it. I've heard this ride take a lot of slack for not being quite as intense as the newer RMCs or lacking any sort of inversions, but this is the prototype, and with that in mind, I was not disappointed whatsoever. This ride was awesome. The queue was cool. You get that old wooden coaster charm while walking up, and once you get in the station, you notice that the cars are actually Cadillacs. And something I found pretty hilarious was that there's a chicken coop that you could wait in if you don't want to ride. But as soon as you open the door to walk into the coop, a chicken starts balking, so everybody looks at you. After New Texas Giant, we made our way around to the Spanish section of the park, and we rode La Vibora, the old Intamin bobsled coaster, which originated at Six Flags Magic Mountain. With this being an old Magic Mountain ride, I had to get a ride on this, so me and my niece jumped on, and my two nephews followed in the car behind us. I did not expect this ride to be as crazy as it was. I'm not saying it's anything crazy like X2 or anything, but it was pretty gnarly in its own right. During the first couple turns, I lost my brand new hat that I was so proud of. Bummer. Overall, this was a really fun coaster experience. It was maybe one of the most unique experiences I've ever had on a coaster. I would definitely recommend it. After this, we left the park and walked over to the Denny's next to our hotel. It was an almost alien experience being able to sit down in an actual restaurant and eat. California has been on lockdown for a long time, and that means only outdoor dining. The next day we got up and headed to the park, nice and rested. The first ride we came across was Pandemonium, so we decided to give it a spin. Pandemonium is a Gerschlauer spinning coaster, and I'll tell you right off the bat, this was a lot of fun. I was worried at first that I might get sick on this ride from all the spinning, but it wasn't like that at all. The spinning action of the trains make for a high score in the re-rideability of this coaster. I've heard they have one of these up in Santa Cruz Beach Boardwalk, and I'm gonna have to check it out when California reopens everything. Next, we made our way back to Joker, the S&S Free Spin. This was my first time ever riding one of these. I'm not sure if there's one in California or not, but I must say it was pretty fun. This thing was actually kind of creepy going up that first lift hill, going straight up and looking out over the city. The only thing I've ever ridden that was close to this was the old Green Lantern ride at Magic Mountain, and this thing is just leaps and bounds better. After the Joker, we continued our counterclockwise journey through the park and came across Runaway Mine Train. This thing's an old Aero mine train from the 60s, and being as such, I had to get a ride on it. First of all, this is a really fun ride, and it's a lot better than Gold Rusher at Magic Mountain. There were actually dedicated scenes in this ride to the Old West, such as passing through a saloon and going through an old camp. Not to mention the tunnel at the very end of the ride. With all the good stuff being said, I'll say that this ride is really rough, but that's what we come to expect from old Aeros, right? The transitions are scary and you're always trying to brace your neck and your back. And when we hit the second lift hill on this ride, I almost snapped my back in two. But don't let me scare you away. Go ahead and give this ride a shot. I would recommend it. After this, we got ourselves turned around and we found ourselves to the entrance to Judge Roy Scream, a classic wooden coaster. When I jumped on this ride, I asked the attendant not to staple me, and he didn't. He left a lot of room in between my lap and the bar. That was a huge mistake. I was flying out of my seat after every hill and slamming my back on the backrest. I wouldn't say this is a horrible coaster, but I would recommend being stapled for this one, guys. Next, we continued our loop around the park and made our way back to Shockwave, a classic Schwarzkopf double looper. The only other Schwarzkopf I've ever ridden is Revolution at Magic Mountain, and I must say I was not disappointed with Shockwave at all. The back-to-back loops were super intense, and there was some serious airtime in the back row down some of those hills. My niece wanted to ride this one over and over again, and since there were no people waiting in line in the station, the attendants let us marathon this one. I rode until my thighs were too sore from the lap bar and told her, "You could ride it by yourself now." After this, my nephews took off for the hotel room, so it was just me and Rainey at the park. We made our way towards the center of the park and found ourselves at Runaway Mountain. I thought the queue for this was so cool. You walk through tunnels and rocks into this mountain and you don't know what to expect. When you finally get to the front of the line, you see these cool little troll figures standing guard at the entrance to the coaster. At this point, I was so excited, I didn't know what was coming. I thought this was going to be a coaster with some dark ride elements mixed in. But I was wrong. Once inside, you notice there's just one cheap-looking, stuffed animal-looking monster in the end of the ride, with a flashing strobe light on it. Six Flags had the opportunity to do something really special here, and they totally dropped the ball in my opinion. But the coaster was fun nonetheless. They just could have done so much more. Believe it or not, Runaway Mountain is a Premier Rides ride. I think it was their first one they ever did, but correct me if I'm wrong. After this, we headed towards the Giovanola-made Hyper Titan. The queue was really long, kind of like Goliath back at Magic Mountain, but it was nothing to write home about. Once we got up to the ride, my niece was absolutely terrified to ride this. I had to talk her into it. But once we got on and went through that first drop, she started laughing and said it wasn't that bad. I'm in the camp that really doesn't like Goliath, or Titan for that matter, but we had to grab the credit real quick and moved on. After Titan, we had gotten every coaster credit that we needed, So we decided to ride the train around the park. When you first enter the station by the New Texas Giant entrance, you notice that there's a mannequin in a little room waiting to sell you a ticket. My nephew thought that was a real man at first, and he was like, "Why aren't you answering me?" When the train finally made its way back around to the station, the attendants told us that the train was about 120 years old and that it was going to take a minute to refill it with water. During the refill, they sprayed every seat with some type of disinfectant cleaner. This entire process took about 10 whole minutes. After we boarded the train, we went about halfway around the park and had to get off because they said that it was very popular. This was sort of a bummer. I wanted to ride the train around the whole park, but it is what it is. After our train ride, we went out for a bit of shopping in the park, and then we headed back to the hotel room where we ordered pizza for dinner. On our last day in the park, we went and re-rode a bunch of rides, and I got some nice shots of the new Aquaman Power Wave coming next year. This thing looks like it's going to be an absolute beast, and it's going to be a great addition to Six Flags Over Texas. I'm going to have to make a trip back to give it a ride. We also grabbed a ride on Justice League Battle for Metropolis. It was really fun, and it was definitely a familiar sight, even though it differs quite a bit from the Magic Mountain version. We hung around the park for quite a while, just taking in the sights and sounds, because we knew we weren't going to get any of this for a while once we got back to California. My niece and nephews left a little early for the hotel room, and I hung around the park until kinda late. I got on a couple of family rides while I was by myself, including the Teacups, Conquistador, and I tried to ride the antique cars, but they said that you needed at least 2 people to ride, so that was a total bummer. At this point, I did not want to leave the park, but I knew we had an early flight to catch, so I said my goodbyes and went to the hotel, but not before grabbing a cool souvenir mug. Overall, we had a very fun time, and it was totally worth taking the trip to Texas to go to this theme park. It was such a welcome break from the drudginess of the lockdown going down in California. If someone asked me if they should visit this park, I would definitely say yes. Thank you for taking the time to watch this video, and if you would, like, comment, and subscribe. It helps me out very much.